Rolling on 6 now. Nonsense.
Welcome to another edition of Voices of the Writers, readings of poems, vignettes, and stories for the Eat, Sleep, Write podcast. No One Can Hear You Scream, Part 2, by L. Meadow, read by Adam Scull. As the Dutchman plunged towards the Andromeda sun, taking me and the mysterious entity that had killed everyone on board to our certain deaths, I prowled the corridors restlessly, unable to sleep. The entity and I played a game of hide-and-seek through the ship, avoiding each other, trying to find each other. I was not going to die without a fight. If it thought I would scare easily, it was wrong. During one of the long night hours, I decided to record all the events that took place. I recorded my thoughts and actions. I recorded all the deaths. I even read Mandy Pilkins' diary. Finally, I recorded our position and the fact I had locked the autopilot to take my ship into the sun. Then I broadcast it on every frequency I could. I pumped the messages out into space, not hopeful it would be heard immediately, but hopeful that in time someone, somewhere, might hear it and know how the Dutchman had met her end. We would not be just another ship lost in space. What I had not counted on, in this remote corner of space, was being heard almost immediately. Another freighter, making the profitable run to the Andromeda system, picked up my signal on the subspace emergency frequency and rushed to my rescue. I was shocked when I heard the familiar sounds of a ship docking with the Dutchman, the sound of its thrusters firing as the hulls kissed, the thunk as the air pressure equalized. I raced to the lock, heart pounding with fear. Who had found us? Why were they here? I didn't want anyone else to die, and I feared the entity would start killing again. I had to get to them first and warn them. Perhaps there was still time for them to disengage and get away from this haunted ship. A man came through the airlock.
"We got your distress call."
As I ran towards him, I screamed, "Get off this ship, immediately!" The sedative caught me high in the chest. I gaped at it stupidly, before collapsing. More men poured through the airlock. 2 picked me up and carried me, with little care, to the sick bay.
"Seal him in isolation,"
1 ordered. The men carried me into the med bay and dumped my unconscious body on the table. They sealed the isolation bay. The bay automatically sprayed cleanser over me, which woke me abruptly. I staggered to my feet and hammered on the viewing glass. "You have to leave," I yelled, "before it is too late."
"We are answering your distress call. We formally offer our assistance. Refusal to accept a formal offer of help will render your claim to the vessel null and void, and the ship liable for salvage. Now what is it to be?"
he asked.
"Will you accept our assistance, or are we salvaging this hunk of junk?"
His tone made it clear which he would prefer. The Dutchman may have been old, but she had some pretty hot mods hiding under her battered skin. I had a feeling he knew that. Resigned, I nodded.
"Your formal acceptance of aid is required,"
he said, holding up a portable recorder. I sighed. "I accept your offer of aid."
"You will cooperate? Or do I have to keep you locked up in here?"
"I will cooperate, but you have to know, you and your crew are in grave danger. The entity that killed all my passengers and crew is still on board. I've been hiding from it for days."
"We listened to your broadcasts. We think space has affected your mind."
I stared at this portly merchant amazed. Who did he think had killed everyone on the ship except me? The realization dawned. Like light flaring from a distant supernova, understanding burst into my brain. You think I did it?
"Yes."
"Am I under arrest?"
"At this time, we are here to offer assistance, under Space Code 3750. Your guilt is not for us to determine. We shall provide crew, and escort this ship to Andromeda for where the relevant authorities can examine you and your ship."
He was a portentous idiot. I hoped the entity would come for him first. Sadly, my desires played no part in the first killing. As I resigned myself to the inevitable, the first scream echoed from the engine room. I noted, while watching the fat merchant pale, that I had been correct in my calculation as to where the entity was hiding. I also wondered what the fat sweating merchant was going to do now that the entity had shown itself.
What was that?
Asked the merchant fearlessly. The entity has claimed its first victim from your crew. Shall we go see? I led the way to the engine room. The man lay crumpled against the hatch, hands clawing at invisible monsters, a look of terror frozen on his face. I felt the merchant come up behind me. If we were to survive, I couldn't spare his delicate sensibilities. I stood aside to let him see. He vomited. Noisily. Think this was space madness? I asked dryly. He gulped. I patted his shoulder reassuringly. You will get used to it, I said. How many did you bring onto my ship? He stared wildly at me.
Are you insane? We have to get out of here. Leave this ship at once.
He raised his comlink to issue the order. I grabbed his hand to stop him. Your crew was dead the moment you brought them aboard my ship. If you want a chance of surviving, you tell your remaining crew to undock and wait for you to return. Do not give any sign of leaving. Do not give the entity any clue you suspect anything or anyone but me. I gave him credit for listening. He took a deep breath and told the ship to disengage and stand off the forward bow to await further instructions. I hoped this at least would save the crew on his ship. The crew on the Dutchman I dismissed as dead. All that remained was to see how they died.
Thank you for listening to another edition of the Eat Sleep Right podcast, located at eatsleepright.net. Please send any questions, comments or suggestions to comments@eatsleepright.net. Please consider a donation to support the Eat Sleep Right podcast. Donations can be sent to our PayPal address at donations@eatsleepright.net. Once in a lifetime, the theme music for the Eat Sleep Right podcast, courtesy of Stephen Paul, all rights reserved. Used by permission. Please join us again for the next edition of the Eat Sleep Right podcast.